Okay.
Well, I told Marlene
No.
I probably wouldn't come.
Good morning.
I
Good
didn't
morning.
wanna, have to hurry.
Welcome to Coffee with the Mayor. Thank you all for being here again. I'm solo today. I'm trying to line up some future guests. So if you have any ideas or if one of you want to volunteer to speak, you're more than welcome to let us know what's going on in your life. So we'll start with a few slides. If you have any questions along the way, just give me a holler. I'm going to start with the Stoughton trailer site. These are some newer pictures that we received. So just to recap this, I know you've seen a few versions of this. The red area here is slated for commercial, and then the purple is kind of a mixed area. The yellow would be residential housing, kind of an extension of the current roads. I think that at least one of the roads has already been extended and leads into the development. So those lots are getting close to be ready to build on. And then this area here, there's two lots that are slated for multifamily. And we have a proposal under consideration for what they would call the authentic Stoughton. And those are built by Continental. They have one in Cottage Grove currently. I think they're working on one in DeForest as well. And they're looking at approximately 310 units. And I'll get you some more detail on that as we go through the slides. The Stoughton Trailers headquarters is located right here. I'll show you some pictures of that as well. They're making good progress. They're hoping to have it completed within the next couple of months, and there'll be some ribbon cuttings and tours and grand openings and those sort of things. As you can see, it's surrounded by wetland. We have to put in retention ponds on site for the stormwater runoff. And then the trail system, which will connect to the future underpass under the highway. And the trail will go all the way up toward the church and Sand Hill School, as well as connect to the existing trails that are south of the development. And then this area here is the green space. And initially we're looking at using some of that for large fields for things like soccer and ultimate frisbee and flag football and lacrosse and those types of activities. And then eventually, as we complete the park master plan, the other amenities will be identified and we'll look to implement that master plan. The process for the master plan is next week at the Park and Recreation Committee. They will make a recommendation. There's 3 proposals for the master plan study. And they would make a recommendation to the city council for one of the 3 firms. And we anticipate that could be like a 9-month process. And once that's completed, then we'll look at budgeting options as far as the amenities that people in the community would like to see there. There'll be public participation components, and then we'll begin to implement those components into the master plan. So this is the authentics, the apartments I mentioned. So this picture's turned from the last one, but so basically this is Sand Hill School here. And you can see they're looking at a dozen buildings, including a clubhouse. I think they have 312 listed there. It's on 15 acres, 12 buildings, 21 units per acre, which we typically have somewhere between 15 and 30 in our comprehensive plan, so that meets, it's consistent with our comprehensive plan. One of the things that we're still working through is whenever we do a project like this, they have to have so much green space. It's typically 50%. And this proposal here currently falls a little bit short, but we presented them with a few options in order to try to make that work. One option would be for them to manage, you can just see the edge of the stormwater pond here, is for them to manage the stormwater pond, and then they can get credit for the balance that they need in order to meet the green space requirements. Or they can purchase some additional land on the other lot here. Or they're actually looking at ideas like maybe putting some grasses or community gardens on top of buildings and things like that. So when we work with the developers, we try to make sure that their designs meet our guidelines and our ordinances, and then we try to help them come up with solutions if for some reason they can't meet them based on their site plan. So this is at the Plan Commission right now. We gave them some suggestions. We anticipate they'll be back next month. And then we would probably put together an agreement with them so they can begin this project either in the fall or in the spring. This is kind of an aerial view, is what it'll look like. There's a lot of buildings there, but they put in some features for the residents, so it'll be like their own little community. And the one thing I would notice, this picture doesn't really do justice, is this site here is several feet lower than Sandhill School. If you were to look at this, it looks like it's at the same ground level topography, but it's really sunken. And that's one of the reasons why when we worked with Stoughton Trailers to lay out the development, we felt that this would be the appropriate place if we were to build apartments, to build them there. One, by being sunken, it won't be as intimidating. And two, they have it behind the school and the church where there's simply nobody there at night and there's no neighbors there. We felt it would allow the neighbors, especially in the Eggleston's Woods, to be able to continue the privacy that they enjoy. The amenities that we're looking at doing would include a clubhouse that could be used for like birthday parties and gatherings. They would have a swimming pool here, and then also an area for pets. I think that's on area for pets. They call it a pet playground. A kiosk, areas where people could kind of hang out together. So it's kind of its own little community by offering the amenities. They have a weight room as well. People that live there can enjoy that, or they can go walk on the trails, and it'll be good for families that want to go to school at Sandhill. Yes, sir.
Being a lower level, what's the probability of flooding in every week?
So what we've done is we've worked with the Capital Area Regional Planning Commission. They're the ones that have to approve any stormwater management plans. And this is designed to accommodate a 200-year flood. So it's a pretty sophisticated system. So we don't anticipate there'll be any issues with flooding because of the way it's designed. And it's a huge investment in order to be able to accommodate that. So good question. We believe it's been addressed.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Maybe you said it. Is this like 55 plus housing or no?
This would be considered market rate to any, there's no restrictions. What they're trying to do is by having what I consider a little bit higher density is to build it in a way where they can keep the price point somewhere a little bit lower than the other apartments they see out on 51. So there's different price points, and the ones out there I think are going for, I'm gonna say somewhere between $1,700 and $2,000 a month. These ones here would probably be $1,500 to $1,800 a month. So that's their kind of their target audience. Still pretty expensive, but that's the going rate right now. The cost to build these things are incredibly high these days. And then they still have to manage them, so even their management costs have gone up as far as paying their people and the maintenance for these buildings. But so that's what they're trying to do. It's a market rate, which means there's no subsidy, which in this particular area, we use those property tax collections are based on the rental, and those property tax collections are what we use to pay Stoughton Trailers back for all the investment that they had to borrow for to get this site ready. So that would include the stormwater management plan, all the utilities, the roads, the parkland dedication. So the property tax in these tax incremental finance districts are used to pay off that debt. So having a market rate makes it easier to pay it off. If it was subsidized, then the revenue or the property taxes would be less. So that's why this one's a market rate. I don't think we could even have made a subsidized program here, create enough money to pay off that debt. You know, if we had higher end rent, it would be easier to pay off the debt, but this is the market that they think would be good here. And being next to the school, I think, you know, that should be a good project. They seem like they have a really good management team, so that's really what it comes down to on the multifamily. They're only as good as the team that they have that manage the units once they're complete.
Is that Highway 51 along there?
B.
No, that's B.
No,
That's
it's
B.
That's B and C.
Oh,
That's B and that's Trailway.
Yeah, so B would be up here, and then this is Greenbrier, which starts on 51 and it loops around, and this would be a new road. This would be an extension of Greenbrier that'll go to B. And they're in the process of working with Dane County for this access here. More than likely, they'll be adding some sort of a turning lanes to get in and out of there to make it safer. The other part of the development, they're also working with the county. There's a future intersection that was planned for right here at Country Club Road. And the preliminary traffic impact analysis, or what we call a TIA, would suggest that this would need to be a roundabout here. So Stoughton Trailers is deferring this access point because they're really starting with this section of the development next. Once that's completed, they'll more than likely do an updated traffic count to see whether or not that changes the traffic at that intersection, so they can decide whether or not the roundabout would still be appropriate, or maybe turn lanes, whatever the traffic study recommends. This is a picture of Stoughton Trailers, and this would be kind of from Greenbrier or Kingsland, I think it is, that extends in there. So this is the front of the building where they'll be entering, and this is the view from basically Highway 51 and B, where the future roundabout will go in there.
Do you know how many people work or will be working at that headquarters?
They've suggested about 160. It's mostly their management team and then their engineers. Excuse me.
So there's gonna be a lot of traffic on that road between the residents and the employees, Stoughton Trailer.
Yeah, and there'll be multiple ways to get in there. So there'll be one or two accesses off of B. There'll be the access at Greenbrier where the apartments are now. That'll be a roundabout that'll go in next year. There'll be access roads from Kingsland as well as Creedaman will be extended. So there'll be multiple ways to get in and out of there. So I think that's gonna help with the traffic flow. And the employees, some of them currently work in Stoughton, some of them are currently driving from Stoughton to Evansville or Broadhead. So having them here will be good for Stoughton Trailers and for the people that work there, as well as for the businesses. When they work in Stoughton, more than likely they're gonna go out for lunch and do things like that, spend money at our businesses. Shifting gears, this is over by Walmart, and Dunkin' Donuts would be to the right, or right here, and then Shopko is here. So as you're coming toward the roundabout, you can kind of see if you go out there now, they're starting to construct a car wash out there. So that'll be a conveyor car wash, like 100 feet long, that pulls the cars through, and then they'll have a group of vacuums. So it's a Mr. Splash is the brand. So if you've gone to the Sun Prairie Menards, there's one there, it'll be similar to that, or there's one in Janesville on Milton Avenue. So that's been under construction for a few weeks now. Construction season, in case you haven't noticed, is going on. It'll get worse before it gets better. So the main project going on right now is the DOT project, which starts on Highway 51. And this year they're doing it in 3 segments. The first segment is just about completed. And you can go on our Public Works website, and there's updates. I just copied and pasted that off of there. And so basically, phase 1 is almost complete, the highway end. and then they'll start from Highway N, down to just past Stoughton Health.
Church Street, I believe.
Pardon me?
Church Street.
Church Street, okay, you should know, you live down there, right? And then, the last section will get you to the fire station. That's all expected to be done, by the end of the year. They did have one area where we had a resident down here that drove on the fresh cement. So that's setting us back a couple weeks. You need to let that cement cure for a week. So I don't know what's gonna become of that, but it's
Or their car.
always something.
What did
Yeah.
to their tires?
As far as I know, they didn't get stuck.
That's good.
But otherwise, phase two is scheduled to start here and in the next couple of weeks, weather permitting, and then phase three would begin in August and September. That's the smallest chunk, so hopefully that'll go quickly. Yes, sir.
Where's the access points as far as being able to get to Stoughton Hospital during that second phase?
That is a work in progress. So right now, we have some detours, and I'll go through what I have here, and there's additional ones that are updated frequently on our website. So the official detour for the DOT is always state highways, especially for semis. So what they're trying to do is the semis that would normally get off at 51, they want them to go up to N. That's the official detour.
Okay.
Of course, we know there's shortcuts to get around town, and the one that we've been suggesting is that basically N has been open, so you can come down N, and then for the semis that need to go down towards Stoughton trailers, they can come down this way, because they're, you know, right over in this area here. And then for, oops. Must have this one out of order.
Yeah, looks like a splash pad.
So for the hospital, there's gonna be detours going, you can kind of see this blue one here right now, and this will shift. So eventually you'll come down here and get over. So the hospital detour currently is in the blue, and when they get to the next section, I'll have a fresh map next month. But you can go on the Public Works website, and they've been working with the Chamber of Commerce because we can't officially have a detour, so we do it through the Chamber of Commerce. So you can go on the Chamber's website as well, and they'll have the evolving detour routes, the local detours. But once again, you know, we're trying to keep the semis off of Main Street where we can, and then really the locals will find their way around, and people that are trying to get here for events will struggle a little bit, but I think they'll figure out where to go. Let's see. So the next slide, these are slides for the riverfront. So one of the things we've been doing is working with Alexander and Company, and they are currently under memorandum of understanding, which means they have to work toward getting to a point where we get under contract for a developer's agreement. So they've sent us some preliminary plans. There again, we're having conversations about trying to meet the green space requirements. So those conversations will continue. So right now, their preliminary plan for what we're gonna call phase one, these two buildings are approved with contingencies, and one of them is to meet their green space requirements. But this kind of gives you a general idea of what's gonna happen. You have the river here, stormwater pond here, trail system, which we'll talk about in a little bit. This one actually shows it pretty well as far as what we're trying to do, basically from the bridge over to the powerhouse and underneath the culvert. That's stuff we're working with the DNR on right now. And then really trying to establish the number of units, the landscaping, and then phase two would be over in this area here. And that's just basically a mock, like a placeholder. We haven't really had any discussion. You can see they didn't even really design any windows. They just said this is probably basically what we think we can fit there and at least meet the building requirements the developer needs in order to make it worth their trouble of building, and then the parking that would be required with it, but but that one hasn't been really even discussed. They just put that on there for discussion. So we're hoping within the next few months, we can get under contract with the developers agreement. And they're just working through the details of their site plan, which has to be approved by the planning commission. So I'm hoping they can have their site plan approved at the planning commission next month. And then we can enter into contract and they can start working in the spring. They would also be applying for some sort of a tax credit. So some of the units would be subsidized, but I think it'll be open to all ages as far as I know now. And to what level they'll be subsidized, I'm not really sure yet. It'll depend on exactly how many units they land on, whether or not they do all the buildings at the same time, and then, what the cost will be to construct. Here's some more pictures of what it would look like kind of from the river. What they've tried to do, and you see this often on the newer buildings, is to mix it up a little bit. They change the roof lines, they add balconies. This particular area here with the angle and the color variations and even the material variations, they're trying to capture that Scandinavian look down there, which many of our buildings like across the street have in our community. So they're trying to provide consistent with that. And then on some of the other sides, like this one here, they're also trying to respect the past and have a little bit more of an industrial look where they can. So they've been trying to mix it up a little bit. It looks a lot different than the proposals that we had in the past from Brink. Those were more brick. And what we're finding is, the brick and stone prices really have escalated. They haven't really come down, and it adds hundreds of thousands of dollars to cost to construct. So they've come up with some different materials in order to try to somewhat replicate that, but yet give it a little bit more modern feel to it as well, and still honor the industrial and Norwegian heritage. And then down on the river, Man Park area, is anyone been down there? So it's just about completed. They were doing the striping the parking lot yesterday, and then they have a few more light poles to put in, so they're making good progress. It'll be ready for the fair. That's not going to be a problem. Couple adjustments that the fair will be making this year is long term, we would like the midway to be kind of out in some of this green space out here. The grass is really only in its first year, so we'd like to see the grass have an opportunity to establish itself a little further. So we think that, initially this year, some of the midway may be set up in part of the parking lot here. Not really sure how that's going to shake out yet. I haven't had any direct conversations with the midway. The other thing that's going to be a little bit different is that normally the employees for the midway park their semis up along the river. And my understanding is that with the construction going on, it doesn't look like that's going to be an option this year. So what they're probably going to be doing is parking right now. We're across from Stoughton Utilities. There's a cement parking lot here, and they're probably just going to park those semis there, and that's their living quarters for that week that they're here. So those are conversations that we've been having in the last few days on how that might work out. Long term, I think one of the options we're looking at is there's an area over here that has green space that we might be able to have them camp out here. The big issue here is the drainage isn't very good. So we need to get some soil samples, figure out if we need to put some drain tiles in there or what we can do in order to make that area drier. The other thing we have to take into consideration is we have our wastewater treatment plant here, and we want to be in a position for future growth with that. We're pretty much committed to this site down here. So more than likely there'll be discussions with Stoughton Utilities about either acquiring this land from the city and or possibly some land from the bus barn garage. And I would imagine there'll be some sort of a feasibility study as far as what the utilities needs will be and 100 years, and whether or not that land is suitable for it. So that'll be something that you'll have to stay tuned for. You may or may not have heard that our utilities director, Jill Weiss, is taking a position in Sun Prairie, which is a great opportunity for her. She's been here for 6 years. She took over when Bob Cardez retired, and she's done some great things here in Stoughton. You know, one of the first major projects was when TDS wanted to do the fiber optic citywide. We had to replace quite a few telephone poles in order to accommodate that. So Jill and their engineers at utilities were very instrumental in going out, and they had to evaluate each and every pole, and the ones that needed to be replaced, they had to help coordinate the work to get that done. With Hooper did a lot of those. And then also, like, just as that ended, then we started the whole lead pipe replacement program, and that was for the homeowners. It was through a DNR grant. So Stoughton Utilities employees literally went door to door in areas that we identified more than likely had lead pipes, but we weren't 100% sure because some of them were installed a long time ago and the record keeping wasn't done electronically, so it's really hard to identify them. So they went through and verified, created an inventory, worked with the contractor, and it was really one of the first projects of that magnitude in the state to get that completed. So there was, I think, over 700 of them that they had to replace, as well as some of our own utilities that were in the roads that had to be replaced at the same time. And then there was, I think, 9 businesses or nonprofits that were affected. Those businesses weren't eligible for the DNR grant. That was only for residential portions from the curb to the home. And so we worked with some of the pandemic money that we received from the federal government and basically paid for the businesses that had lead pipes going to their buildings to make sure they all got completed at the same time. So that was a huge project. Jill also has been able to bring in some new staff down at Stoughton Utilities, which they have a great crew down there. So we know that we leave in a good place, and you know, she'll be successful in Sun Prairie. It's a bigger community, more responsibility. So we wish her well with that. So we're going to be filling that position here in the next several months. But you know, basically down there, they've had a few people that have been in positions a long time that can really, you know, keep the balls in the air until we get that position filled. So that's what's going on at Stoughton Utilities. I don't know, it's public, but not too many people know about it, so you might be some of the first people in the community that know about it. Certainly the city council and city staff knows, but beyond that, I don't think the hub's covered that at all at this point. So other things down the river, you've seen this map many times. We're still trying to get to the point with the DNR where we can schedule the public hearing. We've made pretty good progress in the last month. We've finished up 2 rounds of soil testing, mostly in the river. And then we put together a material maintenance plan, which basically identifies what they found in the soil samples. And it basically addresses how the soil will be dealt with, whether or not it can be left, it can be capped, it needs to be removed off-site, whatever it would be. And then currently the DNR and our consultant from the remediation company, as well as our engineers that are working on the water park, are working together to make sure that that plan will be approved by the DNR. Once it is, then they'll schedule a public hearing for the downstream features. And as I mentioned on the earlier slide, the downstream features would include this feature right here, which they're calling a small dam. This deflector here, which is similar to the one we put in a few years ago, which is the rock structures that you see that go out into the river. And what that does is it creates different depths there for fishing, and it kind of changes the flow and creates the waves in there for the people that want to potentially tube or kayak. And then the trail system, as I mentioned, is designed to go underneath the first culvert. So the trail system has already been approved by the DNR, but the approval is is contingent on this approval here and this approval here on those features that we want to add. So the plan would be is to do those features in the trail in the fall after the fair, while we do this trail on the Man Park side, so we're not driving heavy equipment to get into the river to do work over a brand new trail. And then there's some grant money that is involved with that too, so that's what we're hoping to get. Hopefully the DNR will help us get to the finish line on that. So there's a lot of moving pieces and a lot of complications along the way. Assuming that we can get through all that, then we'll begin the discussion on what we're gonna do with the dam. We've had a proposal that the city council approved about 3 years ago. And it's taken us this long just to get to this point. And we were actually really going nowhere. What we did originally is we submitted the plan for the whole thing. And the DNR, for whatever reason, basically sat on it. So we decided in order to keep things moving, we would work on these downstream features in the trail, get that approved because we wanted to do that regardless of what we did with the dam. And that's really helped facilitate a process where we could just focus on that because the permitting process is less complicated for that than it is the actual dam. Because with the actual dam, basically we're have to change the water level order, and that involves a little bit more process. The downstream features, even though those permits are fairly complicated, it really doesn't affect the water level, so you take that component out of it, and we just felt it would simplify things not only for the DNR, but for us as well. And then I've also showed you this chart many times, so one of the things we would do is when we get to the point where we submit a permit to change the water level order, the DNR would go back and verify the engineering flows that we came up with to see whether or not they've been affected by anything that we weren't aware of or by anything maybe the county did, or just basically make sure that the modeling is consistent with what their findings would be. We wouldn't anticipate any major changes, but as I mentioned in the past, under normal water level flows, the impact, especially when you get up to Highway B, under normal circumstances, it's only 3 to 4 inches. A lot has been made out of that without really facts to back it up. Certainly, we're not gonna do anything that would try to dry up the river. We want to use the river more. That's one of the reasons why we're doing it. Plus, we want the river to be cleaner and have better fishing. So those are the reasons. That's kind of where we're at on it. I know that question always comes up. We have a lot of events that are going on. Gazebo music, last night was the 3rd week, so there's still plenty of time to get out on a Thursday night and enjoy the music down at the gazebo. And they've been well attended. The weather's been pretty good so far, so hope to see you down there. I go any chance I can get. If I don't have a meeting on Thursday night, you'll usually find me down there. And then we have a whole bunch of other things coming up. We have Taste of Stoughton, which is next weekend, not this coming, but the following weekend. And that's a free event at Nordic Ridge. So this is the event that's been going on for several years now. It has really grown. And they have live music, they have kids activities, they have a cornhole tournament, and I'm sure a few other new surprises this year. So every year it gets a little bit bigger and better. And a lot of food, some beverages, some different things for the kids as well. So, and then we have a Juneteenth celebration coming up that same weekend. And that's going to be at the Stoughton United Methodist Church. So this is the 6th year of that as well. And then at Eastside Park, there's a Pride event on June 28th. I know the library is involved with that as well again. And then the Stoughton Fair is in July. It's hard to believe that we're in summer already. But we'll have the park ready for them. We're really excited. They've added new events this year, so I think that having the additional parking and the trail system and the grandstands down there, is creating more space for them to host their events, so we'll see how that goes for them. Catfish River Music Fest is the same weekend, so that starts on, I think, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday this year, so it's a 4-dayer. I think last year was a 2-dayer. The fireworks will be on the 4th of July. Once again, the fireworks are put on by the city, working with the Stoughton Fair. And this year, Visitor Services, which is kind of a leg of the chamber, will be help sponsor the fair. Question?
Yeah, I saw someplace where 4th Street was gonna be tore up in the near future. Is that gonna conflict with any of this, the fair or the catfish, or?
No, the 4th Street will be basically from, I think it's like from Milwaukee to Isham. It'll be just on the other side.
South of the park.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be a little disruptive if you're coming up from Dunkirk to the south. But yeah, we don't anticipate any problems. The fair doesn't seem to be too concerned about it. So yeah, the music effects will be going on, and the lineup for that is out. You can go to the Catfish website and see who's playing there, and you can go to the fair's website and see what activities they have there. Splash pad, or not splash pad, Troll Beach is open. The splash pad is too, but this is a picture a couple weeks ago, and they're filling it up. So that'll be ready to go as well. Other road projects, as long as it came up, I think they began a project on Lincoln. They're doing from Creedman to Highway B, which is gonna affect the path going to summer school at Sand Hill. So we were able to work out an arrangement with the church so people can get to Sand Hill School from Highway B through the church parking lot into the school district parking lot. And then we'll be doing a portion of Van Buren. We were hoping to do all of Van Buren, but the bids came in too high, so we're just gonna do the worst section this year. And then there's some other smaller, Christensen Way and Mellon, some of those we're actually gonna do ourselves. Last year we bought some equipment that we can grind off the asphalt, and then we can crown and re-level the base, and then we'll have a paving company come in and finish the work, so we're doing that to save money. If we had more people, we could do more projects, so we only bite off what we think we can get done. And basically the equipment pays for itself by not having to contract that work out. And then, there'll be some other miscellaneous projects. You've probably seen in some neighborhoods, we really have an aggressive sidewalk replacement plan going on right now. It can be a little disruptive, but some of the sidewalks were in bad shape. And then what we're gonna be doing is similar to what we do when we trim our trees. We have different segments set up in the city, and what we're finding is when we're bidding this stuff out, it's really hard to say, okay, we want you to fix this sidewalk here, and 2 of them over there, and 3 of them over there. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna do it in segments, and we're gonna say segment 1, we're gonna do all these 1 year, segment 2 we'll do the next year, and I think for trees they have 5 segments. Not sure how many they have for sidewalks, I assume it's similar. And that way we have a rotation going, and we have some consistency to try to maintain these things, because we're seeing a lot more people using them. Since the pandemic, people are doing more outdoor activities, and sidewalks is a safe way to do that. We're also working with the DOT on the rest of the engineering for 51 coming through here, as well as going all the way out to Highway B. So the section from Harrison to B will be done next summer, so that'll be including the 2 roundabouts. And then they're gonna have a middle turn lane, so that'll be done next year for a section up there. And then this part down here on Main Street, it'll be 2029, could be sooner if they have the funding. And obviously this stretch down here is gonna be the most disruptive because of our businesses down here. So the Public Works is already working with the chamber to try to come up with not only some detours, but maybe some promotions and ways to get people to, be excited about still supporting our Main Street businesses, because we know that's really disruptive. So I think that's all I have for slides today. Are there any questions on anything? Yes, sir.
I see on Chapman, they had ground some of the sidewalks, the edges that stuck up. Is that something the city's gonna start doing, or?
Yeah, we've done a few of that. So every year, we are a founding member of Cities and Villages Insurance Company. And every year they have like a grant that you can write for safety. So a couple of years ago, we wrote a grant to buy the machine to do that. So sometimes, you know, when the sidewalk lifts, you get that lip on it, and as you mentioned, you can just grind it down and level it off and get several more years out of it. Sometimes, you know, you just have to replace it. Other times, if it sinks, and we did this, especially on Main Street, you'll see little different color round areas in the cement where we've drilled into it and we pump in some material and it lifts up the sidewalk. So we use various techniques in order to, you know, replace or hopefully extend the lifespan of the sidewalk. So that is something that you'll see more of. And if you have a sidewalk in your neighborhood where you see something unusual going on, you can bring it to our attention and we'll try to take care of that right away. Like I said, we're gonna have a rotation for replacement, but if it's a public safety issue, you know, and it needs to be dealt with immediately, maybe there's something we can do in the short term. Otherwise, if we have to, we'll replace that section. Yes?
I think it's called Sledding Hill Park off of Racetrack. There's a path there that's had some work done, it's been like flattened out.
Yeah.
And they were talking about paving it, are they still gonna do that?
Yeah, over at Racetrack Park, we've been having difficulty with the trail, they're getting washed out. So we bid it out a couple times, and I think the first time we didn't get a bid at all. And then the second time, I think the bid came in higher or something. So what we decided to do, and we're gonna be doing more of this as well, is we're gonna do some of the excavating ourselves. That way, when we bid it out, we only have to bid out the actual asphalt, and we think we'll get more bids that way for that portion of it. We're not in a position where we're gonna be laying blacktop. We don't have the equipment and the manpower, and it's, you know, it's probably not worth it for a community our size to do that. But we do have the excavators and bobcats, so they're gonna level that out, and we think that we'll be able to get that paved. So we're gonna do more and more work like that as time permits. If we were in a position where we had more people, we could probably do more of that work. We typically have somebody else do that, and that's work that we borrow for. And if we do it ourselves and have people, that comes out of our operation money, and we're really limited by the state law on how many people we could hire. So this is one of my arguments, it's like, well, you think you're saving the taxpayers money by not letting us hire somebody, but we're borrowing money and paying somebody else to do the work. So you're not really saving the taxpayers any money by doing that. And it's a shell game, and the people at the state level, they either don't understand that or they just don't care. You know, they think their talking point, we're keeping your taxes low. Well, you are on the operational, because we are limited, but if you notice last year on your tax bill, our borrowing went up 20%. And it was a combination of things, it's mostly because the price of everything went up. But we are trying to, you know, get more projects done, and if we could do those in-house, really the bottom line, if you combine the two, we'd be spending less money because now you're not paying a higher rate and you're not paying interest on it. But if you see a state legislator, you can tell them that. I've been telling them until I'm blue in the face. Our local legislators get it, you've met them, they've been here. Actually going to the Dells tomorrow, there's Mike and I are going, there's a convention up there, so I'm hoping to meet some other legislators from other districts and try to spread our message, and it's not just Stoughton, it's statewide. You know, what we really need to be able to do though long-term is reach out to those that are in mostly rural districts that tend to be a little bit more conservative, where they're not doing a lot of these projects. And let them know that, you know, if we're gonna be able to provide, you know, housing and services and businesses, we need to be able to work together in order to be able to help cities support these, because out in the rural, you know, they're not building apartments. they don't have, their hospitals are closing, so all the people that come from the rural into the city provide wear and tear on our roads, and we have to provide the services, and they're not paying any taxes to us. So it's a real struggle for us. We want to be able to help our neighbors and provide the services, but it's really just not a sustainable model of the way it's currently set up. I feel a little bit more optimistic in the last couple of days, some of the updates I'm getting on the state budget, where there is some recognition, not only for us, but for the school districts, that, the state still has some surplus money, and I think they're feeling like there's too many referendums, and that they can maybe free up some of that money and provide us a little bit more relief so we can continue to provide the services, and especially in Dane County. I mean, as I've said in the past, we're growing by leaps and bounds, way more than any other county in the state of Wisconsin. And if we're gonna be able to continue to do that, we need resources, and to keep our costs down, we need people. And to provide the services, we need people, and that's kind of the conundrum right now. And you're seeing that with all the communities going to referendum, and some of them are successful and some of them are not. And then if they're not, then you have to start having hard conversations. Well, what are you gonna do? We're not gonna be able to mow the lawns in the parks as often. We're not gonna be able to do these trail works because we can't afford to do it. We have to cut back on services. We don't wanna do that. That's why people live here. They love their services. They don't like their taxes, but they love the services, right? So, that's kind of the balance that we're trying to get. And, if you think there's stuff that we're doing that we shouldn't be doing, you can let me know, because if we don't have the money or the people to do it, it helps me prioritize what's really important to you and what's not. We try to provide a good balance of services, like our brush pickup. Some communities don't do that at all. It's a great service that we provide here. We do it every other month during the summer. Before I became mayor and I was on the city council, they tried to eliminate that service. I'm like, no, this is important to people. Not everybody has a pickup truck and a chainsaw and can afford, to buy a truck or to pay somebody to haul their tree trimmings away. And to be able to put it out on the curb, we kind of expect that and take that for granted, but that's something that we provide that not all communities do. So we like to think that we do the little things. We do a lot with sustainability and environmental practices in our departments. Some people think that's really important, others not so much. But we think it's important because we want to be good stewards and leave our community in a better place than it was when we took over. So those are some of the challenges that we make. But if you think there's anything wasteful going on, feel free to bring it to my attention, because we definitely embrace feedback. We're always looking for continuous improvement, and the best way for me to get that is from you all, because we're trying to provide you the services.
Can you comment on tomorrow's protest that is supposed to be for the no paints in town?
Yeah, I don't know a whole lot about it other than it's local people are coming together. They're gonna meet in front of the post office. They have to stay on the sidewalks, and I imagine they'll be making signs and things like that. And I heard they may have a couple of speakers lined up, but I'm not gonna be in town, so it won't be me.
Is the police involved in that? It sounded like on the internet that, because it's in like 2,000 cities across the United States, but it sounds like that police presence is going to be in the community. Do you know anything like the Stoughton? Are they going to be any streets closed off or anything?
They did not pull a permit to close any streets
Okay.
that I'm aware of. The police department, they know the events going on, and they'll just monitor it and make sure that nobody's out in the street where they should be, and people are safe and orderly. I don't anticipate any issues. People in Stoughton have always done things peacefully. I don't see any reason why that would change. And if it does, the police would certainly be there to help address that. Sir?
How often does the street cleaners go out?
On Friday mornings, they go out and do the downtown for sure.
How about
Before I
the
get on
residential areas? How often do they?
I think it's monthly. I'd have to ask Brett. And we have requirements. We get grants for stormwater management. And so we're required to go out, not only because it needs to be done, but in order to fulfill our obligation to receive the grant money that helps pay for the equipment and people to do that.
I was just wondering, because in the spring, if they could go out one more time, I mean, the trees drop so much stuff in the streets, and that all ends up in the stormwater, if they could
Right.
get some of that. It was pretty bad this spring.
Yeah, I'll have to ask Brett, and I know they try to get out there at its peak, and you never know when it's gonna be,
Yeah.
you know, and sometimes there's even snow on the ground. So it really varies, and was it last year or the year before where it was late and then it all like dropped at once? You know, and I mean, it's Wisconsin,
Yeah.
but yeah, I can probably get more information from,
Right.
Director Aber about how often they do that. But that is something that we do. We do it in-house. We have the
Yeah.
cleaners and also the leaf pickup. That's a good service that we have. I try to mulch mine, then I don't have to rake. But, so that's another way of doing it. So I'll do that, you know, I'll go over, you know, trees, drop some leaves, I'll mow it. A few days later, they drop some more, I'll run over it again, and then I have this routine that I do, but it works out.
You know, one thing with it, that's a nice service and we like it, we use it too. But, when they come around to pick up leaves and like we live on Van Buren across from St. Anne's, there's so many cars parked along there all the time.
Sure.
So it's too bad that it's not coordinated in cleaning the street and picking up. There was some time that you couldn't park along there, but I don't know, that'd probably be pretty tough to manage.
I can talk to Brett, I mean, the police chief can put out temporary no parking. So they could maybe coordinate something if that is an issue for them, but I can ask him specifically about Van Buren. I mean, the church is there too, but if they did it during a weekday and they did it early in the morning and then, you know, get in and out of it, those guys usually start like at 6 in the morning.
Well, we're across from the entrance for the rehab across the street, so the
Oh,
trucks
yeah.
are going in that entrance. There's only 2 lanes road. So
Sure.
they're going in there, and a lot of times we have to stop in the road to do the loading and unloading. And then the leaf pickup guy is over here trying to do his stuff. And then there's all these cars parked along here. Looks like kind of a cumbersome mess that those guys can't figure out how to do that.
Do you know what time of the day that happens?
In the morning.
Is it like 6 or 8 or 9?
It'll start about 6:30, because that's when the employees come in, 6:30, and
That-
shift starts at
that
7.
Nazareth?
Yep.
Okay, all
Well,
right, well.
It's a
I'll-
hard call,
Yeah, I'll talk to Brett and see, you know, if there's something.
It might help the guys that are trying to do jobs
Sure,
along
yeah, they just like to go.
Well,
Just like when they're snow plowing, they don't like to go around cars, but sometimes you have to. Sure. Is there a question over here? Oh, you're back.
First of all, I want to thank you, and I don't think that you realize how much time the city people put in. I can't even imagine what your schedule looks like, and you come and give us information, and you stay as long as there's questions, which is wonderful. But in your presentation, forgive me if I'm backtracking here, a lot of housing going on all around, which is great, Stoughton's growing. But the concern that we need to bring up, and I need to bring up, is the low-income housing. What are we doing with that? We talked about a subsidy, and I don't know how much help that is. But we have homeless people in Stoughton, and, you know, our special groups are working hard to get them into housing and help them be sustainable.
Sure, well, thank you for all of that. Yeah, the affordable housing is really a big deal. Where do I start? Well, I'll start with the county. Mike is our county executive. So the county has done a number of things.
Not
And-
executive, supervisor.
And,
I'm not the
well,
executive.
yeah, supervisor.
Supervisor.
But we're pretty tight with the executive, and she's been here a few times, Agard, so. The county's done a lot of things over the years, so they, you know, 40% of their budget is human services. So like some of the resources at the senior center, or money from the county, the food programs, even some caseworker money to help support our employees. So the county has been great, especially for the senior center. Now, going forward, there's still some uncertainty with what's going on at the federal level, what that's gonna look like, but I know they're going through their budget process and, trying to sort that out. The county also has a 12-month affordable housing strategy sessions that we went through last year. Mike and I both went to almost all of them. I think the only one I missed was the last one, and that's when they had the party. Just had another meeting that night. And I'm on 2 committees for that. One is basically the marketing and, trying to help the awareness of what is available. And then the other one is zoning. So we're working on some zoning things for higher density, so you can get more units, which smaller lots, more land use, brings down the cost if the land is cheaper. So we're working on those initiatives. We just updated a couple ordinances. We created one for Arts District, which is gonna be down past the Opera House in that area there. And then most recently, we passed one, they call them pocket neighborhoods or cottage neighborhoods. And those are smaller homes, usually 900 to 1,200 square foot. They're in areas where they have shared spaces similar to condos on small lots. And we just passed it the other night. We already had somebody reach out to us that's looking at potentially some city-owned land that they might be able to do this on. So we're trying to understand, if the utilities will line up and that sort of thing. So one of the things we're doing on the strategy team is we're trying to come up with ideas and strategies to help encourage and provide opportunities for developers to build smaller houses or different price points. And then, especially, for lower income in Dane County, because we have a lot of good services, especially in Madison. They have the mass transit, they have bigger food pantries, they have a lot of support there. In Stoughton we do too. We don't have the mass transit going to Madison, but we have a lot of nonprofits. We have the Stoughton Area Resource Team, we have the free health clinic, we have a couple of food pantries, we have a clothing place, so we have good support. We just don't have the transportation we'd like. So we're working on the zoning. Mike put in amendments to a budget 2 years ago.
And last year.
And last year, you want to speak to that?
Yeah. Subsidized housing or workforce housing is, all housing is expensive. To build places now, you're talking 350 to 400,000 is like the starting home prices these days. And those costs aren't gonna go down. So really, there's no such thing as affordable housing unless you subsidize it. So there's 2 ways of subsidizing. You either subsidize rents for people, or you try to subsidize ownership. And ownership is very hard to subsidize. Right now, there's only a couple of programs in the Madison area. One is Habitat for Humanity, that is kind of a subsidized ownership for homes. We've got some projects that have gone in Stoughton here, and they do a great job. They're all over the country, but they have a really good Dane County Habitat for Humanity organization. A couple years ago, I put together a $2 million grant for them through the county, and we got it passed, and they recently received the funds. And what that is for is to help them purchase land, because land prices are just skyrocketing these days. So that gives them an edge there. They also have all their volunteers that help them, and other contractors that subsidize them, those types of things. So those people are able to subsidize actual ownership of homes. That's hardly done anywhere else. Another one is the land bank. There's a Madison area land, what do they call it?
Land trust.
Land trust. And what that is the trust actually owns the land, So in this current budget, I put together another $2 million grant for that organization. And half of the money outside of Madison, half the money in Madison. And that goes for that organization to purchase more land. They have some housing already that they've put up over the years, and they're gonna build some houses on them. And they help people, just like Habitat does, they help people through the whole process to get loans and help them to subsidize being able to have home ownership. So it basically puts people, rather than renting for their whole career or for their whole life because they can't afford to buy, it actually puts them into an ownership situation where they can build up some equity and that kind of thing. So that's a couple of the things we've tried to do, and I try to do that because it's for ownership as opposed to just handing a developer money so that they can lower the rents for people to pay a lesser rent. So.
Thank you.
You bet. And then, so specifically, some of the projects, I mentioned the one on the river. So some of those will be subsidized. We'll see how that sorts out. Those are either through state tax credit programs or federal tax credit programs, which I never thought I would be learning about that, but it's very complicated. And then out on 51 West, over by past Stoughton lumber there, there's a lot there, a 5-acre lot that they're looking at building some units there. And we've been negotiating with JT Klein. It seems like it's been like a year, but it's probably only been 6 months. And recently, there's a grant that they're going to apply for, and they get more points if they partner with a nonprofit. So we've been having meetings with our housing authorities. Our housing authority did Greenspire years ago, and those were recently rehabbed because we want to take care of the ones that we currently own. And then the housing authority can act as a nonprofit for that tax credit purpose for the developer, which gets them more federal money in order to do the project and keep the rents low. And there's different levels of the median income household, and based on that grant, they have to build them and rent them out at those price levels in order to be eligible. We know we're losing, Rosewood basically. That was a Section 8 project for 30 years. Owner passed away, family sold it, and the owner said, you know what, we don't want to go through all the paperwork that's required to continue to be a tax credit deal because it was right at the edge of expiring, so they're going market rate. So there's 90-some units there that went from your rent being, say, $900 a month to $1,200 to $1,500 a month, people that lived there for 30 years. So it's really sad. So we're trying to replace those and then build some new ones. But we also know that big housing, especially subsidized and senior, especially requires more services from police, fire, and EMS, because let's face it, when we get older, we get to be higher maintenance. I know I am. So we get more calls. So we have to balance our growth that we meet the needs of the community, but yeah, we can still provide those services at the same time when volunteerism is going down. So we've been trying to hire more full-time people to be trained in fire and EMS in order to have the flexibility to supplement the hours that the volunteers work. Because most of our volunteers back in the day had a business on Main Street. The alarm went off, they put a sign on their door, they ran down, jumped in the truck, and they went. We don't really have that as much anymore. A lot of our volunteers are UW Med students that drive down here, and they're younger and their priorities are a little different, and they love Stoughton, but not as much as we do because they don't live here. So they're not as available as much as the people that live here. So those are the challenges that we're trying to balance as we grow. We're not just saying, well, let's just do this to grow. We're trying to do it in a way where we can still provide the services, have a reasonable property taxes, and yet provide the opportunities that everybody deserves. So it's a juggling act. And we're doing a lot of single-family homes, proportionately more than a lot of the municipalities in Dane County, and I'm proud of that because, as Mike said, I think building equity, financial equity is one of the things that sets people up for life. That's why I came to Stoughton, was affordable housing. And, so I'm really passionate about that. And, we'll continue to work on that. So thank you for the question. Any others? Yes, sir.
What's the city ordinance on these electric scooters we see all over town?
Yeah, so
They're dangerous as heck.
They go like crazy.
they really are.
Cars
And
hit the sidewalk.
so we talked about it at public safety. I've talked about it with statewide organizations. We're part of the League of Wisconsin Municipalities. And what they're telling us is there's really not much we can do to regulate them. And that's becoming more and more of a challenge because they're not really clearly defined on what they are in the state law. And so, yeah, we can't come up with a way where we can regulate them in a way where we think we can enforce it, which is really unfortunate because sooner or later, not gonna wood, somebody's gonna get hurt.
Yeah, I can't believe it hasn't happened already.
Yeah, and it's,
Sure it has, please.
yeah. So that's a valid question, but we've investigated. I know the Police Chiefs Association, and then Lieutenant O'Neill reported out of public safety. They've been talking about it too, and nobody has come up with a solution. That's definitely an issue. The other thing we're working on right now is a vaping ordinance. That's another one, and we're somewhat limited in what we can do by state and federal law on the licensing, but we've discovered that we can limit how many vape shops we have open going forward based on our zoning code. So we introduced it to the city council Tuesday night, and so it'll be at the next meeting for approval. And basically what we're doing is we're creating a radius, either 300 or 1,000 feet, depending on if it's like a school or healthcare or a residential neighborhood, to try to really limit where these can be placed, how visible they are, because we know vaping has become a huge problem. And you can go talk to the high school students. If you don't believe me, they'll tell you it's a problem, and they're concerned about their fellow students. So, we think that that's an approach we can take. And, one of the challenges for us is, the big lobbyists, the tobacco makers, or the big lobbyists, they hand out tons of money for campaigns at the state and federal level. And then they get these bills passed because they basically have their attorneys, their lawyers write the bills. And then they lobby, the legislators, and they pass the stuff. And one of the challenges is that the state law on a purchasing age is different than the federal law. So then if you go to a C-store and a minor is in there, they're saying, well, the state law says I can do this. Well, the federal law doesn't. Which one do we follow? So it's really challenging when the state and federal government don't get together and have consistency. Believe it or not, alcohol is better regulated than tobacco and vaping. And I think there certainly could be some improvements in the alcohol laws as well. But what you're seeing is businesses that are trying to position themselves. So if marijuana becomes legal, they'll be established and they can make a lot of money. So yeah, those are all challenges. We're trying to do what we can for public safety. We're going to be doing more in road improvements, flashing signs, crosswalks. We're having conversations even about this intersection up here on whether or not there's something we can do. The DOT may or may not be receptive because we have the right turn lane here. And one thing they said they will do is at the stoplights, we're gonna put arrows in there. So like left turn, right turn arrows, things like that. Because the school district, the school bus drivers are like, by the time they come down the hill, they're like halfway in the intersection and the lights turn red and, cars are pulling out and it's just a mess down here. So we're working with the DOT to make improvements on the highway as well. Hopefully that'll help address that. They're not really supposed to be on bicycles and scooters on Main Street. There may be an enforcement campaign, but as part of this reconstruction, we will have more designated bike routes So at least we can get them, you know, on Washington or Jefferson and keep them off of Main Street, because that's where the highest risk is, because there's more traffic. All right, you had enough of me? All right, thank you again for being here. I really.
Thank you.